Thank you. Good morning. Selfishly, when I heard about this event, I always take an opportunity to come home. I am a layperson from the Western North Carolina Annual Conference. So I want to say good morning to everyone, especially to my brothers and sisters from the Western North Carolina Annual Conference. As Ms. Millie just stated, I am Dana Lyles. I serve as the director of the U.S. Regional Office on Multicultural Ministries. I am a newbie to Global Ministries. I just arrived in Atlanta 9 months ago from Greensboro. So I'm very excited about the work we are doing in our ministry that we are setting forth. Just a little background about Global Ministries. This is our bicentennial year. In 1819, John Stewart, a freed African American, went to Ohio and was in community with the Wyandot Indian Nation. He is the founder of the first Methodist Episcopal Missionary Society in America. Word got around that John Stewart was in ministry through mission, and other mission societies began across America. So we owe our roots to John Stewart and his ministry in Ohio. As a culmination of our bicentennial year this year, Global Ministries will be returning land back to the Wyandot Indian Nation in September that we have been holding in trust for 200 years. So this is Global Ministries now. We are more than missionaries. Most people hear about the mission work we are doing and the work we are doing through UMCOR, but Global Ministries is so much more than missionaries and disaster relief. We are leading the denomination's work in our global health work, but we're also doing work in community development, creation care. We offer scholarships, education, and sustainable development. The unit in which I work, we are the connectors of our organization. We like to establish relationships across the world. As you can see on this map, we have 5 regional offices. We are in ministry from everywhere to everywhere, from the United States to Asia Pacific to Africa, and even to Russia and Eurasia. In our office, we are responsible for connecting and collaborating with annual conferences for programs related to multicultural ministries. And we also relate to the ethnic plans, human relations ministries, and Native and Indigenous ministries. Fred was here yesterday, and he spoke about SBC 21. There are 6 racial ethnic plans in the United Methodist Church. 4 of the 6 plans reside in my office. We are in partnership with these racial ethnic national plans. We have the Asian American Language Ministry Plan, the Korean Ministry Plan, the Hispanic Latino Ministry Plan, and the Pacific Islander Ministry Plan. While SBC 21 and the Native American Comprehensive Plan reside at Discipleship Ministries, we are intentional in being in ministry with those 2 plans in the work that we do. One of our hallmark programs in our office is the Community Developers Program. This program was started in 1968 as an African American program. And this program was established to advance the church's capacity to be in mission with the community around them. From slavery to the civil rights, the church was the cornerstone of the community. Everyone went to church for meetings. As civil rights organizations were gathering and strategizing, they went to the church. So with the Community Developers Program, we are aiming to bring the cornerstone mindset back to the church to serve as a central hub for the community that it serves. Our community developer sites are very diverse across the United States. Work includes advocacy, economic development, and any needs that are worthy of being addressed within the local context. Here is a map of our CDP sites. We have over 20 sites across the United States. As you can see, we do not have any sites in South Carolina, but we are aiming to change this map and add sites in South Carolina. We do have a site in North Carolina, the Partners in Ministry. You will hear a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes, located in Laurinburg, North Carolina. Here's one of our sites, Emory Beacon of Light. I had the privilege of spending some time with Joe Daniels in DC a couple of weeks ago, and he just did his ribbon cutting on his brand new facility. he saw a need in his community around equitable housing in Washington, D.C. Consistent with all cities across the United States, housing costs are rising. So Emory Beacon of Light took it upon themselves to start a ministry to provide state-of-the-art housing for those in need in Washington, D.C. If you can see in the middle, there is a picture of an underdeveloped area. Emory wants to begin a restaurant that will train ex-offenders and people returning into society to work in the restaurant industry and to provide additional income, not only for the church, but provide sustainable employment for those in the community. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, this is a fort that is located in Washington, D.C. It is serviced by the National Park Service, and the church saw a need that when people are visiting this site, there was no place to go to the restroom. In their new construction, they built an office for the Park Service to staff for $1 a month to provide a restroom service for those who are visiting this park. So Emory saw little windows of opportunity to be in ministry with those around them into the community. Another one of our CDP sites is the Church for All People in Columbus, Ohio. This church has many ministries within the context of their church. Here are just a few. They have started the All People's Fresh Market and the United Methodist Free Store, which provides fresh produce and clothes free of charge. They also offer a variety of fitness and wellness classes, as well as an art program and a Hallmark First Birthdays program that provides resources to young mothers around the first birthday of their child. I have a video of the Partners in Ministry program located in Laurinburg, North Carolina, which we will watch now.
Hi, I'm Mabel McCallum, Executive Director of Partners in Ministry. Partners in Ministry now is a national mission institution of the United Methodist Women after 12 years of serving children, youth, seniors, disabled, and otherwise marginalized families throughout the Gateway District. The ministry partners with local churches, conferences, work teams, and faithful service of God to improve the quality of life for thousands of people and their families.
We are grateful for the staff and all the leadership that work at Partners in Ministry, and for the other ongoing ministries such as mission outreach, especially in this storm seasons that we've had in recent years.
My name is Bishop Leonard Fairley. I'm the Bishop of the Kentucky Annual Conference. So here in this community, you have a wonderful and unique treasure in Partners in Ministry.
They have mentors here, and my son does have a mentor who come in every day and kind of help him on his homework and any social issues that students may have. They're eager and willing to, listen to those mentors.
I can tell you from taking a tour of this program myself, and I would suggest that everyone who sees this video just come see what's happening at Partners in Ministry.
The next project is a multi-purpose building. It's the best money you could spend, because the money that you will spend to help Partners in Ministry, their faces behind those dollars. You'll see the kids, you'll see the elderly, you'll see the people who are so excited just to have somebody come work on their home. And so if you're looking for something to invest in, and particularly if you're looking to invest in people, this is your place. This is your shot to make a difference for the kingdom of God and to make a difference in the lives of countless people.
So here are 3 programs making a sustainable and substantial impact within their communities. And through their ministries, they are able to touch so many people and show the love of Christ, not through the word, but through their actions. As you can see on the screen, here are some of the partners that are partnering with Partner in Ministry. And one thing that we ask our CDP sites to do are to establish partnerships. Within the Methodist Church, we all know that our resources are dwindling, and it is not sustainable for us to finance 100% of all of the projects. So we do ask that our CDP sites do forge partnerships across their cities. Another program we have is the United Methodist Voluntary Service program. And this serves as a resource to volunteer-based groups that are challenging political and social and economic systems within their communities. This is not a specifically racial ethnic program. This is open to all congregations in the United Methodist Church, and we provide financial resources up to $10,000 per year. We had a congregation in Winston-Salem, North Carolina that saw that there was a need for ramps to be built for elderly housing. And so they applied for a United Methodist Voluntary Services grant, and they went through the community and provided and built ramps for senior houses that needed ramps built for their inhabitants so they could be more mobile within and outside of their house. Racial ethnic local church grants. How many of you have received an email from your district superintendent in the past month and a half about racial ethnic local church grants? Okay. So I will be asking for the email addresses of everyone in here so I can personally forward you the application for the Racial Ethnic Local Church Grant. This is a program offered by Global Ministries to assist racial ethnic local churches and congregations in annual conferences with programs around the 4 areas of focus. We offer a 1-year salary support of $10,000 and programmatic grants up to $15,000. As you can see, the grant deadline is right around the corner of June 15th. Another program that we have in our office is with our Native American brothers and sisters. We offer Native American Ministry Sunday grants to our Native American brothers and sisters so they can be in ministry with their communities. Not only do we believe in building up our communities, we believe in building up our brothers and sisters and assisting in educational attainment. We offer 2 scholarship and grant opportunities from Global Ministries, and the first one is the World Communion National Scholarship. This is to support students in master's or doctoral work who are preparing to be in church or community leadership directly related to the 4 areas of focus. All we ask is that you are a U.S. citizen, you are an active member of the United Methodist Church, and be from a community of color. Another grant opportunity that we have is available for our undergraduate students who are also preparing to work in church and community leadership around the 4 areas of focus. And again, this is for an active member of the United Methodist Church and a person of color. As you can see, we are a very diverse team in the U.S. Regional Office on Multicultural Ministries. We truly live into the work that we do. As you can see, we have representatives from all over the world that are serving on our team. I'm going to pause right now. Are there any questions around any of the programs that I have just spoken about? Yes, ma'am.
You didn't actually speak about it, but could you just share a word with this group about the loans available through the partnership with United Methodist Development Fund?
So that is not my wheelhouse. Yes, please.
A lot of United Methodists don't know about the United Methodist Development Fund, which was created to work with congregations that might have a lack of credit history and might have difficulties in securing loans for mortgages and building programs. And it is, thank you. It is a program that has a fixed rate, and I believe the rate right now is 4.5% for loans. It works on an individual basis with congregations, works with you through times where you are going through ups and downs. They have a website, United Methodist Development Fund. And I just wanted, while you were talking about partnerships, they are very, very good partners to have.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Are the applications online?
Which application?
For the ethnic grants?
No, they are not online. Global Ministries has gone through a website revamp, and so we are having some difficulties with uploading our applications. So all of the DCMs were sent the applications. that were supposed to be forwarded to the district superintendents and to the local church. Again, I will forward the email and the application to everyone in this room once I receive the email list.
Would you, are y'all gonna, the deadline is coming quickly?
Yes.
Are y'all gonna move that back?
No, we're
just getting it.
With Global Ministries, we have a deadline, especially with funding, that we have to adhere to. So that is why the deadline is June the 15th. If you have any other questions, I have left cards outside. Please email me. I am always available if you have any additional questions, or if you would like to continue the conversation around the Community Developers Program or any other funding opportunities we have available from Global Ministries.
Is this program, if I go to the Global Ministry website, I can read up on these different grants and things?
Yes and no. Again,
That's
because of the website relaunch.
So do you have some literature on that with you?
I will send all of that out electronically attached to the email that I will send.
For anyone, it should have come to you from your DS, so just go back, type the DS for the information.
You said it right, shoot it.
Okay, thank you.
I've sent them out several times, some by request, and I just send them out as resources. Y'all talking about the REOC grant application? I do. Y'all have to open your details.
Yes, sir.
And I will tell you the truth, I do try to put something in the subject line that lets you know this is gonna be something you wanna see.
Dr. Lyles, I just wanted to add, when she mentioned United Methodist Development Fund. Hold it a second. Thank you so much. I got a call as she was speaking, but I wanted to give testimony to the United Methodist Development Fund. We just received $1 million from the Development Fund. It's a bridge loan, yes, for 1 year. And it was a joy to work with them, and they are available to your churches, and they're doing some things other loan institutions are unable to do.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much.
All right, was that some good information? Okay, so I do send them. I don't just send you the link either. I attach the PDF so that you can get it. And I also tell people when they ask me for them that I'll be happy to try to help you to articulate what you're trying to do. That's part of my job. I'm happy to do it. Amen. We're going to move into conversation that everybody kind of wants to hear and know about, and that's GC 2019. And we're going to have Dr. Jim Salley to come, and he's going to present to us the information that he has worked on and has presented in some places since, I think he did some this week.
Yep. Marion this week.
All right. Y'all want to give him a welcome?
Thank you so much. Grace and peace to all of you in the blessed name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I am Jim Salley, and I'm a layperson, a member of Edisto Falk United Methodist Church. My ministry is with Africa University, and September of last year, I started my 27th year. as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Institutional Advancement for Africa University. I see my district superintendent in here, Reverend Frederick Yabua, Reverend Dr. Frederick Yabua. He constantly tries to get me to call him Brother Frederick, but I'm from the old school. I got home training, and they say if you, why don't you just make this one live for me also, and then I can kind of move between both of these mics. Thank you so much. Give GNTV a round of applause. They've been so nice. For those of you who don't know, they come from Macon, Georgia, in the southeastern jurisdiction, and they take care of the ministry of the church relative to audio, visuals, those kind of things. I'm giving them a plug because some people don't really understand the importance, Fred Allen, of having audio, visuals, and all of those kind of resources as we do these kind of events. Bishop Holston probably will be here a little later on during the question and answer session, and he can help us with interpretation. And so we thank him for agreeing to be a part of this presentation. In addition to my role with Africa University, I have served on the General Board of Global Ministries, elected to that body in 1984, after I ran for a jurisdictional conference and was successful. 1984, I served on the Board of Global Ministries from 84 until 92. That's the length of service that you can do on a general agency. So we did that. But in 1988, I ran and was successful in being elected to the General Conference of the church, and have been, thanks to you, a number of you sitting in this room, some saints that are now a great cloud of witnesses looking down on us, and I never forget where I come from. Know from whence you cometh, and there's no limit to where you can go. I was elected in 1988 to the General Conference, and every General Conference consecutively since 1988, and I currently serve as a delegate, second layperson elected to the 2016 General Conference, and then also served, yes, in February at the General Conference, the special call session in St. Louis. The product you're going to see is a joint product between Reverend Ken Nelson, the conference secretary, who was elected second Clergy 2016 General Conference. Reverend Nelson and myself, we put this together. Reverend Nelson did primarily the pre-Judicial Council component and presented that in a number of places. I presented and added to the PowerPoint the components after the Judicial Council ruling in April, and a number of things. This presentation I've made on 5 times. 3 of them have been in the South Carolina Conference, one in Texas and another one in Tennessee. we talk from the perspective of how did we get to a special session of General Conference? Then what happened at that General Conference? What the Judicial Council was asked to rule on? What happened after the Judicial Council ruling? And when they announced their particular rulings? And then what do we do in the future? In Texas, I presented some information from I haven't plugged it in yet.
That's why.
Yeah, that was intentional though.
Okay.
Okay. All right. But go ahead and plug it in. Thank you. Go ahead and plug it in. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. In Texas, I presented some information in particular about how the special session will affect the black church. And that information came straight out of Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century. Dr. Fred Allen is here, and I will, after I present the information relative to General Conference and what happened, we need to understand who we are as a black church. And how does that impact us? Before we get to what is going to be the effect of all of these actions by General Conference and other entities that are out there working relatively right now, working today to affect annual conferences primarily in the U.S., we need to know who we are relative to the black church, because the black church primarily has not been as aggressive as some of the other groups. I'll use that word. So now let's go to the presentation, if you will. How we got here. The General Conference of the church met in February of this year, St. Louis, to act on a report from the Commission on the Way Forward. How many of you know or heard of the Commission on the Way Forward? Okay. And that was the commission that was appointed by the Council of Bishops after the 2016 annual conference, General Conference. Right, thank you. The commission had been authorized to examine paragraphs in the Book of Discipline concerning human sexuality and to explore options to strengthen church unity. This is the South Carolina delegation. These are the people who represented you in St. Louis as well as at the 2016 General Conference that was held in Portland, Oregon. These 16 persons plus 4, 2 alternates, 1 clergy, 1 lay to the General Conference, and then the 2 additional persons, 1 lay and 1 clergy. The practice in South Carolina is we send 4 people to the General Conference. That's in the event that someone is ill or there is an emergency, so we need to have people seated on the floor and represented. This is your General Conference delegation. Any General Conference people in the congregation this morning? If so, raise your hands. Anyone from West North Carolina or North Carolina? Raise your hands. Any General Conference person from somewhere beyond the Carolinas? Are you with us? Okay, but this is your delegation. 8 lay, 8 clergy, elected by you at the annual conference. There will be an election at the annual conference when we meet in Greenville, and that will be very soon. Lay can only vote for lay. Clergy can only vote for clergy. But there's a lot of influence across disciplines. Lay people have some influence. Clergy people have a lot of influence, especially in the black church. Want to simply, now that's a Jim Salley opinion. That's not in the PowerPoint. A total of 78 petitions were included. Also, the One Church Plan. Anyone knows what the One Church Plan was about? Raise your hand. One Church Plan. Okay, we'll talk about it. Traditional Plan. Raise your hand. Connectional Conference Plan. Simple Plan. Simple Plan. West Path petitions. If you don't know, every clergy person or anybody who works for the United Methodist Church, or if you are an officer in a local church, you should know about the West Path petitions, pensions, benefits. You know this next word, disaffiliation. Raise your hand. Good. That's why we're having this session. We're going to help you understand and know what this means. That exit plans, disaffiliation petitions, exit plans. The formal name is disaffiliation. The common name is exit for churches that and individuals that want to leave the United Methodist Church. What was approved? The traditional plan, as amended, was approved. It affirms the current language in the Book of Discipline that bans ordaining LGBTQ clergy. It affirms current language in the Book of Discipline that bans officiating or hosting same-gender weddings. And it boosts penalties and accountability for transgressions of those particular bans. What was approved? Disaffiliation petition as amended. Disaffiliation or what? Common name. Exit. Local churches, you need to look at this very closely. Local churches can leave the United Methodist Church over issues related to human sexuality with their assets, providing they pay. Unpaid apportionments for 1 year before disaffiliation, plus an additional year of apportionments. All debts, loans, and liabilities are assigned and transfer them to a new entity prior to disaffiliation. Pro rata share of unfunded pension obligations to your annual conference, and what is owed to the annual conference before the date of departure. What else was approved? 2 West Path petitions. A local church that withdraws or is closed must pay, at a minimum, its fair share of unfunded pension liability for its annual conference. Clergy who end their relationship with the United Methodist Church, with a conference, will be treated as terminated vested participants, meaning their accrued benefits would be safe and converted to an individual account balance. With me so far? All legislation approved at General Conference will take effect January 1, 2020. When will it take effect? Outside of the United States, in the central conferences, any annual conference located out of the United States is called the Central Conference. And that includes Africa, the Philippines, and Europe. Where I work in Zimbabwe, the rules of the discipline will take effect the next general conference, 12 months after the next general conference in May 2020. Understand? For instance, Zimbabwe's annual conferences, Zimbabwe East, Zimbabwe West, meet in December. So this will take effect the December after 2020. General Conference, that one, there's a slide in there, but I'll just tell you right now, it's going to be held in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2020. What wasn't approved? The One Church Plan would have left questions of same-gender weddings up to individual clergy and congregations. It would also have left questions of ordination of LGBTQ clergy up to individual conferences. The Connectional Conference Plan was not approved. It would have replaced the current jurisdictions with 3 connectional conferences based on affinity, progressive, traditional, or unity. Can y'all see the screen? Okay, sorry. And then all 3 would have used the General Book of Discipline, the Articles of Religion, General Rules, Confessions of Faith, with the ability to adapt other portions to their context for ministry. In essence, well, that question is going to come up, and I'll have more information. The simple plan was not approved. The simple plan would have opened the door to full participation of LGBTQ individuals in the life of the church. And it would have eliminated all restrictions in the denomination's book of discipline related to the practice of homosexuality. So what's next? Now, this is immediately after General Conference, after February. That's where we are now. I've walked you through how we got there, what happened while we were there, what passed, what did not pass. What's next? Judicial Council. Do we all know what the Judicial Council is? Raise your hand. If you know the Judicial Council. Some people say the Judicial Council is the equivalent of the U.S. Supreme Court of the United Methodist Church. Simply put, the Judicial Council decides what is legal, what is not legal in the United Methodist Church. A bishop, a district superintendent, a church member can ask for a decision from the Judicial Council basically about anything on the face of the earth and under the deep blue sea related to the United Methodist Church, and that happens. We do not have persons from South Carolina, North Carolina, or West North Carolina serving on the Judicial Council. This is the Judicial Council, and they come from all over the world. The president of the Judicial Council, here, Attorney Oswald Tway from Liberia, a Harvard graduate, is the president of the Judicial Council. However, in the Carolinas, we do have a close connection to the Judicial Council, someone who works with and for the Judicial Council. That's Miss Lynella Smith from the North Carolina Conference. She's a lay person. She helps with the writing of petitions and information there. And I believe Reverend Schuler, she's a member of your congregation, isn't she? Yeah. So these persons come from north, south, east, west, all around the world, but within the United Methodist Church. The Judicial Council rules on matters related to the discipline and the United Methodist Church, and so they are the final authority. There's only one entity that speaks for the United Methodist Church outside of the General Conference, but that entity also can deal with rulings prior to or after Judicial Council meets, and that's your Council of Bishops of the church. The entity that speaks for the United Methodist Church is the General Conference. Outside of a General Conference, the Council of Bishops do that. Here's what the Judicial Council did. They met 23rd through 26th in Evanston, Illinois, to consider what was passed. Remember, the traditional plan. To consider the disaffiliation plan, or what? Common name. Exit plan. And the West Path petitions. Judicial Council ruled prior to General Conference, the Judicial Council ruled twice that there were certain components of the traditional plan that were illegal. 7 areas of the traditional plan were illegal, even going into General Conference had already been ruled by the Judicial Council that they were illegal. Decision 1378 is what I pulled out. The Judicial Council ruled that the constitutional parts of the traditional plan enacted by the General Conference were severable from those parts that it ruled were unconstitutional. Now that's important. Any attorneys in the room? No attorneys. Well, someone, actually, Tim Rogers, district superintendent from the Marion district, asked for a ruling by the Judicial Council to determine whether the traditional plan was legal. Why? Because, remember, the Judicial Council, prior to our meeting in February, had ruled that certain components of the traditional plan were illegal. And so that motion was passed at General Conference to send the traditional plan back to the Judicial Council to determine whether it was legal. So the Judicial Council took each part of the traditional plan, looked at it, and then they had to rule whether or not if those parts of the traditional plan that were passed, that were legal, could they stand alone on their own? You follow me? See, because they said, well, if you've ruled 7 parts of the plan illegal, then the entire plan should be illegal. See? And so that was sent to the Judicial Council. Common language, the Judicial Council said those parts that are legal can stand on their own without those parts that are illegal. So the plan itself is legal. Follow me? Now that confused a lot of people. The parts of the traditional plan that were declared unconstitutional during the General Conference were held again to be unconstitutional. Just because they went to the General Conference and we acted on them, they still illegal. All right? That's important. Decision 1379. Now, the first decision was an important decision because the Judicial Council had to declare, is the traditional plan legal or illegal? It's legal. Decision 1379, the Judicial Council ruled that the disaffiliation petition passed by the General Conference is constitutional and clarified that the annual conference must approve a local church's decision to disaffiliate with the denomination in addition to the other requirements set forth in the new legislation. Simply put, if you have a local church that says it no longer wants to be in the United Methodist Church, members of your local church have to vote and decide that you want to leave, and then that recommendation has to come where? To the annual conference. Exactly right. So the word out there, I'll make that statement after I do this. Let's go. Judicial Council also ruled some of the important rulings, and this comes straight out of the Council of Bishops. They met in Chicago 2 weeks ago. We were there with them, had a particular meeting, but Bishop Holston and his colleagues went over this from the beginning to the end, and here are some important things that come out of there. The question of local churches exiting from the denomination is one that is determined by votes in the local church and at the annual conference. This retains the value of our connection. Remember the slide just before this one? Okay, this is a follow-up. The practice of certifying Board of Ordained Ministry members on whether they would follow the Book of Discipline in its entirety, including on matters of human sexuality, LGBTQ identity, was found unconstitutional. Okay? Current language around sexuality and restrictions on same-sex weddings and ordination of self-avowed practicing homosexuals was not in question, and that part is still retained. Follow me so far? Did I get back in? Y'all right? I'm good? Accountability for bishops continues to be lodged in the jurisdictional college or central conference. What does that mean? Anybody? If a bishop is to be brought up on charges or have some discrepancies within their offices, some people were of the impression, and it never was, but they were of the impression that the Council of Bishops is the entity that all bishops should be accountable to. But the Judicial Council affirmed what is in the Book of Discipline. Bishops relate to their colleges. What college are we in now? Southeastern. Southeastern. All of the bishops elected in the Southeastern jurisdiction, both active and retired, make up the College of Bishops of the Southeastern jurisdiction. I'll explain why that is so important and why some people were really pushing for that in a minute. Exiting churches must pay their fair share of pension liability. Exiting clergy retain their pension, but it's converted to limit further liability to the conference. See, if you leaving, I mean, you can't ask the conference for anything if you're gone, right? Now, you have your money, you have your pensions, to a certain extent, but you can't come back. It's like a child who leaves, and I heard somebody say, well, always give your child, when they graduate from college, let them keep the key. Because if and here's how it was said, if the daddy takes the key, the mama's going to give the key back to the child anyway so they can come back home when they want. You can't do that if you leave the United Methodist Church as an individual clergy person or even lay people. Lay people have pensions and benefits, lay people who work for the church also, but this is primarily speaking to clergy. So when you go, you're gone. And how many people know how much the United Methodist Church pensions is worth? Anybody? Anybody say what? What do you think? You said how much? How much? Who said? Somebody said something about billions? 25? Yeah, you're correct. It might be a little more than that right now. $25 billion. Now, I'm a United Methodist Church. I have a United Methodist Church benefits plan. I'm not going anywhere. No, but I'm serious. We need to understand this because we don't take enough time, and especially clergy. You need to know what you are invested in. $25+ billion, and it's one of the largest pension plans in the world, not in the United States, in the world, and it's managed well. How long you've been in the United Methodist Church, Dr. Allen? How many years? As a child? No, in the pension plan. In the pension plan. 41 years. Yeah. See, anybody in here prior to 1982? Anybody in here been in church? Raise your hands high. Look at these people. They're vested. They get an additional check that those of us who were not in the plan prior to, raise your hands again. Some people are just looking back. When you see these people, now here's the reason, and here's the point I want to make. Don't lose sight of this, because they are vested, and because of investments that were made prior to 1982, they get a check. They get extra benefits. Now they want me to move on because they don't want y'all to know. They don't want y'all to know they get that money. They don't want y'all to know they get that money. But that comes as a result of an investment being shut down, but the money keeps going. Okay, investments are for what? For what? In fundraising, we say, if you give me $5,000 for a scholarship to support a student at Africa University, that's for now. But if you set up an endowment, that's for what? The future. The future. So your life is sustained. Leave if you want. Exiting. All right. Look. I'm talking in a humorous manner, but this is drop dead serious. And you need to know about your benefits. Yes, sir. Business is business. Thank you, sir. Did I say exiting churches must pay their fair share of the pension liability? I'm saying it again, so folk will know. Some people are moving around saying, we leaving. You can leave. Exiting clergy retain their pension, but it is converted to limit further what? Liability to the conference. Why should the annual conference carry you if you leaving? Okay? All right? 7 petitions in the traditional plan were found to be unconstitutional, consistent with 2 previous Judicial Council decisions, and 8 petitions were found to be constitutional. Judicial Council also ruled, this is important, and all of what is here on the screen, I will give you references as to where you can find this. Our polity disperses authority to lay and clergy delegates, to general conferences in writing legislation, and to the Judicial Council in interpreting the constitutionality of that legislation. Bishops are in the role of providing spiritual and administrative leadership, which is to say, putting in practice the discernments of these 2 bodies, while additional questions may arise as the new church laws take effect January 1, 2020, except in central conferences. Today's decisions provide a path for local churches and annual conferences to move forward. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we pray that we will fulfill the law through our love for one another. Now, that's a statement released by the Council of Bishops in reference to everything that has happened. Now, what's next? General Conference, scheduled to convene May 5 through 15, 2020 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And what we don't know, how and when churches, conferences will respond. They're still responding. There are groups meeting every day to talk about a response. They're meeting. So we don't know how and when churches, conferences will implement the traditional plan. Now, how many of you know that whatever is passed at General Conference has to eventually come back to the annual conference? You know that? Good. So it's coming back. It's coming up again. All right? And what will come before the 2020 General Conference and how newly elected delegates would vote. There are some people right now who are already trying to determine who those delegates will be. All over the U.S. There are certain groups who have advanced their particular lists and say this person is more compatible. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm running. I'm a lay person. My number is 29. Why am I running? I think I have something to offer. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I think members of the delegation should show enough interest to be a part of this gathering.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Well, that's not my purpose for being up here. But if I were outside, I would say, what we can do. Here's what we can do. Remember who we are and whose we are and be witnesses to the love of Jesus Christ for the world. That's exactly what we can do. Haven't we been talking about that since we came here? Since Monday, I've been hearing that over and over. Huh? And the two key words in there are what? What? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Stay focused on mission and ministry. And we can what? Engage each other in calm, respectful conversations, especially those with whom we might disagree. And as I said earlier, I have home training. So whether I agree with you or not, I should be respectful of you and your particular opinion. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's just simple. That's a basic golden rule kind of thing. And remember that we are what? God's people, and that we have a future with what? Hope. If you're for God, and God's for us even if we're not for him. And we can what? Pray, pray, and pray. And then the fourth thing, and pray some more. All right? That's what we can do. So that's how we got there. That's what happened while we were there. When we left, the Judicial Council ruled on certain things. Now we have a way forward. What's left to do now? It's up to local churches. It's up to annual conferences. And then what else is left? It's left for annual conferences to elect those delegates that are going to the May 2020 General Conference. Be sure you elect people. Well, I won't say that. Now, do we have questions? Yes, sir. You may have a question here. I think it would be good if we had, if we let people use the mic. Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Jack.
Who needed? If the annual conference votes to affirm a person who's LGBTQ at the clergy session of annual conference to become a member of the annual conference, and the prescription is against ordaining such people, if they're voted in as a member, does ordination really matter at that point? At the clergy session, we had to vote on every candidate before they're ordained. Once we vote on them, they become members of the annual conference. You get what I'm saying? Ordination is another step. But what happens at that clergy session makes them a member of the annual conference. So the ban's against ordination. However, we can still vote people in conference membership. To me, that's a conflict that's not been resolved, and give some leeway to people, depending upon what the ordained ministry board does.
I understand what you're asking, and I will respond in this way. What you give the mic to Dr. Yabua, because he had his hand up, and I did a presentation, and this question was asked, and he responded so well to it. DS, would you respond to that?
Sure. I think the question you're asking is the more reason why certain portions of the traditional plan was declared unconstitutional. Because to target just one person for one single behavior is discrimination. During ordination, we don't ask people if they're drunks.
Yeah.
If they're thieves, if they cheat, if they commit fornication. Now, the discipline is clear. You can be homosexual, but if you practice, if I have a pastor who practices homosexuality, then I've got a problem.
You can be brought up on charges.
There you go. But if you can be a homosexual, but if you don't practice.
Okay. Now, also, Reverend.
If it's not known that you practice, we can go around asking people what they do, individual sins, before we ordain them. If we did that, none of us would be here.
Right. Now, may I also respond this way? What you described actually happened in a particular conference. The clergy session voted to bring someone in to that annual conference. But the bishop of that conference said they had to uphold the laws of the discipline. They did not ordain that person. See, so you can break the law, but there are consequences. Now, whether anybody will bring you up on charges or not, but that's why the Judicial Council ruled unconstitutional on certain parts. There was a part of the traditional plan that said, if I, as a clergy person, sit before the Board of Ordained Ministries had the right to look within my Facebook, all my social media pages, and then make a determination whether I could be approved or not approved. The Judicial Council rule, that's unconstitutional. That infringes on an individual's rights. Okay? Another question? Yes. Can we have the mic up here? Good morning, Bishop. You're right on time. If I get stuck up here, then you can come.
We have a bishop that was elected at the last jurisdictional conference who was a self-avowed practicing homosexual. Well, she's a lesbian. And I want to know what will happen to her. I know it's based on what you said, it looked like it's supposed to go to the College of Bishops in the conference that she's serving, the jurisdiction that she's serving. But what's going to happen with that particular bishop?
That and the action or any kind of follow-up relative to Bishop Oliveto is who you're talking about, who was elected from the Western jurisdiction by the Western jurisdiction. Remember that portion I said it's coming up again? It rests, the authority rests with the jurisdiction. The Western jurisdiction has to make that determination relative to what happens to Bishop Oliveto. Currently, she is serving 2 annual conferences. Okay? I can't give you any other answer other than that, but the authority rests with the college in which that bishop relates to. Okay? Yes, all the way in the back.
Can they choose to continue her?
Oh, she is continued.
I mean,
she's active. She's working. She's active. She presides over 2 annual conferences in the Western jurisdiction.
so they do not have to remove her. They have the power to make that decision.
The authority rests with the college from which that individual is elected.
All right.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you, let me put this mic out here for you.
What we don't understand is that from the Council of Bishops, we do not govern ourselves that way. In most organizations, you like to go to the very high, to the top, and everybody has that understanding. But we are bishops elected out of our jurisdiction to be bishops of the entire church. So the responsibility and oversight rests within our jurisdiction. So therefore, the questions that you are asking in reference to how do you hold people accountable, how do you hold bishops accountable, they are held accountable within the jurisdictional structure. So if there's a complaint that is brought against her, it will have to be brought against her and adjudicated within the jurisdiction to which she was elected.
And there have been complaints brought from all over the church. But the authority and the accountability, again, rests where? The College of Bishops, where this individual or individuals were elected. Now, that's not the only activity out there that has a lot of people enraged. Right here in the Southeast, we have a bishop who officiated at a same-sex marriage. So that authority and the accountability rests where? With the college. Other questions? I'm surprised y'all haven't asked questions about disaffiliation yet. I'm just surprised. I'm not saying anything. I'm just surprised. I'm just being real with y'all. Here's a question. Here's a
Dr.
question.
Salley.
Let me have your attention. Here's a question. Here's a question. Hold, come on.
I do have a question, and some of you are very seasoned than I am. And I'm looking at history. I love history of the United Methodist Church. The language that was put in 1972 is totally different than what is happening today. So what happened during that 1972 when the general of the black church came within the church during that time, when that language was slipped in there? What did the church do, the black church during that time? When the language of that, when we still don't have the things that we need at black churches. I kind of believe this LGBTQ, whatever you want to call it, is a distraction from the real root cause. Look at many of our black churches. We have our parsonages are down, but we want to talk about somebody, what they're doing in their bedroom. What are we doing? Some of the black folks did not want to come a part of the United Methodist Church. Some left, went to the other ones, but what are we doing? Have we forgotten the reason, the purpose? One person told me we just need to be quiet and watch what God does. And not to get into the distraction, I am probably one of the young new clergy, because after a while, some of us are going to sleep away, and we still have to be here to deal with the things of the church that did not want to handle stuff of the past. So what are we doing? What is the church, what does the black church really have to do? We can leave, but we can't afford to pay our apportionments and all the things to the general conference. So what are we going to do as a collective people
Okay.
Because that's my question I want to
Right.
answer.
Now let me do this, and I'm not being flippant, but let me ask you to ask me a specific question, because some of what you said I agree with, but for my purposes up here, ask me a specific question about some of the information that we gave. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
Yeah, so ask me a specific question, and then I'm going someplace with some of your other comments.
So with all this is happening, if the local black church who don't have 2 cents in their treasure wants to leave the conference, then what? What does the church need to do?
If you have churches who want to leave, they have to follow that process that we outlined there. There has to be a church meeting. The majority of the members have to do that.
Right.
Then they have to come to the annual conference. The annual conference has to vote. That's the route to disaffiliation.
Right, I understand that. Hear me clearly.
Right.
If we have some people in the black church that say want to leave because they want to do all this, they've been want to leave the United Methodist Church. So with all this is right here, how can me or pastors go back and talk to our congregation? So, okay, if this is going to happen, if we can't pay our apportionments and take up collections, and then we say you owe all this stuff before you leave? Right, that's the ultimate question.
Right.
So what do we say? Well, you can't pay me as a pastor, but you want to leave the church. So what are you going to do then?
Thank you, Reverend. That is a good segue to my second part of this, but I see the bishop got up. So he wants to respond. Come on up, Bishop. Thank you for the question. Thank you for that.
Ultimately, that's the question a lot of our black churches are asking. Is this the issue that we have, or are there other issues that are prevalent within the black church? And so you ask the historical question that we often do not talk about. As people who are black, we don't talk about how we got to this place within the United Methodist Church. So to ask your questions about people who want to leave has already been outlined about disaffiliation, but it's by conscience that you leave. Now you have to understand that the disaffiliation side of that, which has been approved by the Judicial Council, did not come out of the traditional plan. It came out of the one church plan. And so that's why it says it's a matter of conscience, that if you cannot follow the discipline as it is. Now, the discipline did not change. So unless you're prepared to say that I can no longer live in it the way it is now, that I like to do same gender marriages and things of that nature, that would be the conscious way that you would leave. And then there are the various ways in which you have to financially be sure that the conference is whole as a congregation prepares to leave. Because as the discipline is now, churches don't leave. People do. Churches don't. And with this disaffiliation part, it is a timed part, that it has to be completed by the year 2023. So as of 2023, I probably shouldn't say it this way, but I will say that as of December 31, 2023, that this part of this disaffiliation agreement will no longer be there.
And you need to help them understand why that's important, 2023.
Because we don't know how the church is going to be configured. We have several, we have the 2020 General Conference where something could be made different. So that's why it's a timed exit. Without that, we have the stated proposals and ways within the Book of Discipline. That's to ask the question, but it's a matter of conscience whether you can follow the discipline as it is now, and the discipline did not change the language. It also brought in some other accountability measures that you have to be in there. So that's why the questions about complaints and things of that nature will be handled within within the jurisdictions and the Council of Bishops in those areas.
Yeah.
Now, you ask another question, and you ask the question of what would a black church do? Now, I can't speak for what other annual conferences are, the conversation other annual conferences are having, but it would behoove the clergy and laity of the black church to begin to have a conversation. Because I don't know how many people were in the Methodist church that came in as United Methodist Church, so you were part of the central jurisdiction. Anybody in here? So you know that when that happened, that only came into being because the Evangelical United Brethren said that they would not join a grouping of people who had a segregated side of it. So it wasn't exactly that they had a general conference to do away with segregation of the central jurisdiction. That in order to complete the contract to bring people together, they had to do some things. And so you had the central jurisdiction to be absolved when it came into geographical areas. But the concerns of the black church still remain. And you would probably know, how many of you remember the flagship churches? We call them flagship churches. You know, in some nations they call them first churches or things of that nature. But if you remember the flagship, how many of your flagship churches are still vital and viable? And see, those are the issues that we're talking about, because what came into being was mandatory salaries, mandatory benefits, mandatory housing.
Yeah.
And so those are the concerns that came in that caught people off guard.
Right.
And I know that I heard amongst laity, and have I gone too far?
No, but I'm going to ask you to stop.
Okay.
No,
All right.
not leave. Just stop. Because my next question, the next question on my sheet, and we've got a number of things.
All right.
No, stay there. Just hear me out. I'm going someplace. We put this together in a form to answer those kind of questions. I'm glad you've segued into that. See, the next question on my sheet is, how does this affect the black church? South Carolina, in particular, the entity that has the most people who call themselves United Methodists who are black anywhere in the world. We have them here in South Carolina. Are you aware of that? Some of you not shaking your head, so you're not aware of that. But that's a fact. Now, the entity that looks at what happens in the black church in the U.S. from a theoretical and practical position is strengthening the black church for the 21st century. That's the entity that the General Conference says is the professionalists on the black church. Why I say that? Because the General Conference, each quadrennium, puts money to strengthening the black church for the 21st century. And standing before you with the microphone in his hand is the president or the chairman of the National Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century program, Bishop Jonathan Holston. Did you know that? Okay, and also here is the national the general, it's not national, we operate from a general perspective. The general executive director of Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century, Dr. Fred Allen. And then I just happen to be the national treasurer for the general treasurer for Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century. I look at the money. I help them understand where they can go, where they can't go, and we have to put the money to it. But the point here is, how does it affect the black church? Bishop Holston, Dr. Allen, and others had already, prior to General Conference, put together a national think tank. Now this was national, not general, within the United States. A national think tank to look at how General Conference, prior to, going into, and after the special session, how it would affect black folk, black churches, African American churches. 2 meetings were held prior to General Conference. Well, 1 meeting was held prior to General Conference. Another meeting was held after General Conference at the BMCR meeting in Atlanta. And there's a 3rd meeting coming up in June, again in Atlanta, with a think tank. Someone here earlier said maybe we need to put together a South Carolina think tank. I think that would be a good idea, Bishop. And you just said it in another way. You said laity and clergy should now begin to have those conversations about where the black church is going. Isn't that what you said? Think tank. Think about it. And then come back, because who is the drum major, individual or agency, that's looking at how all of what is going on, and the word that you used earlier was distraction. That's a pretty good word. See, because Dr. Allen walked this way, and I'm going to ask him to give a few statistics standing right here with Bishop Holston, the power of the black church. Dr. Lyles helped us remember when John Stewart, the first United States missionary, started his work with the Wyandot Indians, or Native American people from Sandusky County, Ohio. What year was that? Say, hold on. What year was it? Are you saying 1819? She said 1819, but we go back further than that. When the first group of Methodists in the U.S. were baptized, there were 2 black people who were baptized. At the first conference of the Methodist Church in the U.S., there was a black female present who's registered. All we know is her name was Betty. Huh? You understand what I'm saying? So we've been here from the beginning. And thank you for lifting that up, Bishop. How many of us come out of the Central Conference? In 1871, my granddaddy, along with 7 other men, came from Colleton County, Springtown to be exact, to Edisto Drive, Orangeburg. A layman, Henry Salley, and 7 other men, 8 men, founded the Jerusalem United Methodist Church, 301 South. Right on that same property now is where Edisto Falk United Methodist Church is located. 3 churches merged. So we've been here from the beginning. Stay here, Bishop. Dr. Allen is going to give you some startling assets about your power and your authority and your ability to do things as the black church. You know, the black bikers, moved their headquarters down to Atlantic Beach. Now, that's where their headquarters is. Now, they're riding around here, but their headquarters used to be in Myrtle Beach. Now, the mayor and city council of Myrtle Beach made it hard for them. When they ride down Ocean Boulevard, they got to go out 23 miles and then turn around and come back. They can't ride up and down. So they went to Atlantic Beach. Anybody know the significance of Atlantic Beach? Anybody from South Carolina know the significance? That's before integration. That's the only beach in this area that black folk could go. So I read an interesting news story when I got in here Sunday night. And it was that the merchants at Myrtle Beach were petitioning the mayor and her folk to take down that traffic loop. Why? Because the black bikers taking a lot of money to North Myrtle Beach and Atlantic Beach. Let's talk about the money, Dr. Allen, right here. You know, you need to hear how many churches we are talking about and the impact of those churches and some of what Bishop Holston, Dr. Allen, and SBC 21 are doing in order to help educate black folk and to help reshift the focus from what might be something that's couched as something else. Now, in my black church, I'm just telling you about my church, Edisto Falk, we have always been for full inclusion, okay? In my church, okay? Now, so Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, I'm going to preface this with a few of the pondering questions that we're grappling with, and then I'm going to give you some precise figures in terms of dollar amount, the aggregate amount of value that we have. Some of the things that we're pondering with, for example, the current reality of the black church, meaning what are our sizes, what kind of churches we have existing and where, categorized by annual conference, jurisdictions, etc. Who are we and what do we hope to become as a result of the action of the General Conference, both the Special General Conference and the 2020 General Conference? What is the aggregate dollar amount of our church property? And I'll just stop right there. We have 2,400 black churches according to GCF&A at an aggregate amount of $2.4 billion in assets that we can identify right today. And the question is, what are we going to identify as non-negotiables in terms of maintaining those properties, what and how the trust clause will affect how those property values and the assets might be held on to or what. But there are some legal matters that we've got to get some instructions around. So Jim, I don't know whether you want me to go further through some of the questions that we're pondering in regards to the think tank after the...
Go ahead.
Okay.
Do the top three, and then I'm going to ask Bishop Holston to take up where he left. This is important, folks. You need to hear this.
Okay. What are the negotiables versus non-negotiables as we look at the total of the impact that the traditional plan or whatever the ultimate plan might be? We all need to have a very clear understanding of what the plans are. And this is what Jim has given us even this morning, which is phenomenal. I'd like to have a copy of that. That's great. What groups are we participating in? There are groups all around the country, some of which we may agree with, some which we may not agree with, but we need to be in conversation and dialogue on both sides and all parties. What would we say or what should we say to the media? How and when should we expose to the general public what we are calling for and what our negotiables and non-negotiables are? Then we need some very specific actionable steps with some timelines in place, and who's going to do it, and how do we hold each other accountable for those steps, those actionable steps that can be measured. Those are just some unknowns. We just don't know how that's going to happen. But I do want to say that there are some thematic questions, some themes, and time under God for what? Time under God for what? Renew the church, and then we need to be very strategic about the selection of our delegates. Jim has already emphasized that earlier.
Again, thank you, Dr. Allen. How does that affect South Carolina? How all of what's happening, how does it affect us? Now, I told you, we're the annual conference that has the most African-American black people in the United Methodist Church in the world. How many of you here from one of the barrier islands, namely Johns, James, Guatemala, any of that? If you're from any of those places, raise your hand. Not if you're a pastor in there, but if you're from there, if you're a pastor in there. I see Reverend over here. Barrier Islands, that's the place where the highest concentration of United Methodists are located. Now, some of you were not aware of that, but they're on the islands, all of those islands. And when you talk about a heavy concentration of African American United Methodists, we can even go that far. Now, I'm going to ask Bishop Holston to come back and take up where I asked him to pause. I didn't stop him. You don't stop a bishop. You just ask him to pause. And talk to us a little about, and unpack a little more about that vision that you were talking about with lay and clergy coming together, deciding our own fate. Nobody will save us from us but us. You know? And we didn't just start this. We've always been the people who were not chosen first. That doesn't bother me. I understand there are lists circulating in South Carolina. When I ran in 1984, there were lists circulating. Whether y'all know it or not, they circulate lists every annual conference. I don't know about West North Carolina, but they circulate lists here. But that's why I'm running. And my number's 29. Come on, Bishop. So clergy people know I'm serious. Clergy people, if you can see in your heart to ask your lay member or members, some of y'all have a number of members. You do know that people who represent the local church at annual conference are lay members to the annual conference. We use the term delegates, but delegates go to general and jurisdictional conference. So if you ask your lay members to vote for number 29, that's fine. My stuff is out there. So Bishop, will you come and take that up? But remember again, the entity that the general conference has, Bishop, you can come while I'm talking. When you come up here, I'll stop. The entity that has given, the general conference has given the responsibility for charting a path, for also being the shepherd and the caretaker of the United Methodist Church to SBC 21. Here's our president.
Okay. So what I want to say to you is this, is that silence does not necessarily mean that you're not involved. And so also being on the sidelines looking in does not mean that you don't have a concern or desire to be in the conversation. So for those of you who are saying, well, there's no communication about the black church, don't assume that silence means that people are not working actively around the fringes. Sometimes you have to begin to know where is it that you need to make your input. What is it that you need to begin to have the conversation? The reason I went back to a point to saying where we were when the merger happened to now is to say, where's our strength? Where's our strength? And then secondly, we have to ask the question, what is it that we're willing and able to do in order to have the conversation with amongst ourselves, one, and two, what input will we provide for the general church? So for me, that is a strategic question, because you can get up and sound off, but what will happen is that people will like to quiet the disturbance and not get to the issue that is most prevalent. So what we have to begin to do is to have the types of conversations that does not make for a knee-jerk reaction, but makes for a significant and strategic response. Are you with me on that? And so that's not where we all come together, because you know when we all get into large groups, about 6 or 7 people will always take control of the conversation. And that those of us who have some significant input to make will feel like we cannot get on the larger stage, so we need to be in a smaller area so we can begin to raise up the issues that are most important. When the merger happened and we became a United Methodist Church, I can remember the late Bishop James Thomas saying what we lost was the ability to speak amongst ourselves, and we lost community. So one of the major things that we need to gain is our sense of voice as community. That's in Western North Carolina, that's in North Carolina, that's in South Carolina. That we have to begin to see who we are, where we are, and what our voice would be. Because what happened then was the mandatories came. Mandatory salary, mandatory pension limits in areas, and housing. Most of our congregations during that time, I'm trying to get to a point. Most of our congregations at that time, and some of you who are in here recognize that our churches were not doing the mandatories. And so when they began to do the mandatories, it put us in a financial crisis. Are you with me on that? I mean, some of you, am I telling the truth? Okay. All right. And so what it did was it took an opportunity that we should be reaching out and turned it in on ourselves. So when I ask you about those flagship churches, many of them are either gone, or 2 or 3 point charges, or have now part-time pastors. There's no harm in that, but I just want to let you know that there is a financial strain that came upon our congregations. I could tell you from my annual conference in North Georgia that 2 of the largest churches that came out of that were Ben Hill and Cascade. Anybody know about Ben Hill and Cascade? All right. Ben Hill and Cascade were white churches that became black. They were cross-racial churches. Bishop Henderson and Dr. Kimbrough. And those churches came back. So now when you begin to look at what are the flagship churches, most people don't even remember the flagship churches. So what are you trying to get to? What I'm trying to get to is this, is that there's a larger discussion that the black church has to have, not about its survival, but whether it's going to thrive. If you're just looking to survive, that's what we've been doing. That's what you do when you have a life vest. A life vest is not designed to get you where you want to be. It is designed to keep you afloat. Are you with me? Until help arrives. Sometimes help doesn't get there in time, and some people are lost. But the life jacket, you're with me on this?
Yes, sir.
When you're on a plane, they tell you where the life jacket is in case. In case you are in need. They also tell you something else. They tell you that what you brought on the plane. Are you with me? What you brought on a plane, you're supposed to leave it, because your main understanding is to survive.
Yes, sir.
Now, survival and thriving are 2 different terms. Once you survive, there you got to think about what is it that we're going to do in order to survive. When we get to a place, when someone gets us to the next place we need to be, the question is how will we survive? Now, the young pastor over here asked about distraction. The issues of the black church are still here. because they've never been really properly addressed. That's why we have BMCR. That's why we have Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century, so that we can begin to help our congregations to thrive. This is a time for us, and Dr. Allen and myself and Dr. Salley and all of us are trying to be sure that we have the types of conversations that will put together an opportunity for us as a black church to thrive in whatever situation that comes about. You hear what I'm saying? Because personally, the question that we have before us is a question. But the question for me is that does that help us as a black church thrive? So what we are going to need to do, and I think that's what we're talking about, what are our assets, where we are located, what are we doing? We got to begin to say to ourselves, what is it that's going to help us as a community, as a church, to begin to address the issues that are pertinent to us in order that we may be the church moving forward that God needs for it to be for us to thrive. So I'm hoping that in the days, months ahead, that we'll be a part of something larger. Now, you may say, well, when is all that going to happen? Well, all of that has not been deciphered yet. I often tell people patience is an acquired taste. We all are urgent when we want something to happen, but then when we want patience, it's an acquired taste. Not everybody is patient as they ought to be. You go to the doctor's office and then you want to tell the doctor what's wrong with you. The doctor says doing some tests, and you say you already been on WebMD. You know what's wrong. Anybody been on WebMD? Anybody told the doctor what's wrong with you? And how many of you been right?
Zero.
So what I'm going to say to you is that we have some structures in place that are going to begin to help us begin to have these types of conversations. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have them on our own. That means that we have to begin to sit down and to talk so that we can be informative to our annual conferences around the issues that are pertinent to us, because this is a pregnant moment, so to speak. Something will be birthed. The question is that will we be part of the birth?
Yeah.
And will we be vital, not just viable? You know, viable is surviving. Vital is thriving. And we're going to have to begin to look at ourselves from a different perspective so that we can have some input as to what's going forward. SBC 21 is going to have a number of these kinds of conversations as we prepare for a general conference. We know that we are electing delegates at our annual conferences to represent us at our general conference. We might want to be a little bit more proactive as we begin to seek what's going to happen. This general conference coming up will be a full general conference, so it will not be a one-issue general conference. It will deal with all of the concerns and needs of our church, and I think that is a time where we can have some significant input, but we're going to have to be strategic in our minds, not to seek for survival, but to seek to what? Thrive. Can you say thrive?
Thrive.
Because I believe that in order for us to thrive, we're going to have to help each other be stronger.
Yes.
Now, that may not mean that everybody's going to be an impact church. But you need to be the strongest church you can be in the places in which you serve to the people to whom are in your community, because we are not appointed to churches only.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
We are appointed to communities.
Mm-hmm.
So our pastoral responsibilities is to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't say to a child that's down the street, that's a Baptist child, or that's a Church and God in Christ child, or that's an AME Zion child, or a Christian Methodist Episcopal child, or that's an AME child. That's a child. And if we have ministry that is happening in our area, that child belongs to us as well. So what I want to say to you is that we need to begin those kinds of conversations, not fighting amongst ourselves, because sometimes, we like to do that. We like to get in and say, well, ain't nobody doing anything, and we ain't got nobody speaking up for us. No, what I'm saying to you is we need to do some things strategically to begin to address some of our issues where we are, so that we can begin to say, what are the things that we need to do in order for us not just to survive, but to thrive. Now, I hope
You got it.
Okay, all right.
But just keep the mic, because Bishop has asked me to do a couple of other things, and we're just about done here. If you have questions, if you can think of something, then there's still time to bring it up. But we want to shift a minute and do a couple of thank yous, and while I'm here, I want to just say to us that I brought this book with me. How many of you know what this book is? This is the annual conference pre-material. And West North Carolina, you have your material. North Carolina, you already have your material also. Look at this material before you get to annual conference, please. Don't wait until you get to annual conference to try and do a crash course the night before. Petitions that relate to what we were talking about in South Carolina, and I would challenge West North Carolina and North Carolina clergy to look and see where petitions related to General Conference are located. In South Carolina, they start on page 71 and they go to 74. There are 3 petitions that speak directly to some of what we have been talking about here this morning. So look at those petitions. Yeah, share them, and the sign says Black Clergy, what? Black Clergy Leadership. You're the leaders. So lead. And no, simply, if pastors will lead, the church will follow, especially in the black church. Now, there are always going to be some naysayers and some folk going the other way, but you still have been given the authority to lead. So lead. I want to thank African American clergy women from South Carolina. Raise your hand. African American clergy women from South Carolina, they had a goal and they went over the top with their goal. They decided they were going to support for their 25th anniversary in South Carolina a female student at Africa University, and they did that. They went over the top. We'll announce the name and show you the picture of that young lady when you come to annual conference in June in Greenville. So give African American clergy women from South Carolina a hand. We want to thank the ELCC and the African American Task Force. You serve on those committees? Raise your hand. Thank you. Reverend Carlethia Benson, Reverend J. Albert Williams chair those 2 organizations. They had an event, and they raised a lot of money for Africa University, somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 by asking people to come together in Sumter at a church, and Congressman Clyburn was the speaker for that event. So thanks to you for that. There is going to be an event at your Africa University pretty soon. I will be done in 5 minutes and 40 seconds with everything that I have to do. Can you hold fast with me until that? Would you please play that Africa University video if you have it queued up now? Bishop Holston is planning something, and he teased you a little bit on the first day. Go ahead and play it.
África amada.
Magadini Mose.
Olá a todos. Bonjour.
Na gaisuwa.
Goeiedag.
Salivonani lonke.
Mulibwanji.
Hello.
We are
Africa University.
Africa University has brought the U.S. to me where I couldn't go, and now is taking Africa to the world. And I am Africa.
As a community of diverse cultures and languages, Africa University is passionate about moving the agenda of Pan-Africanism. Africa University, the dream is alive.
I'm studying medical laboratory sciences on the STEM scholarship. Africa University has the best malaria research lab in the entire country. So if you're interested in lab sciences or conducting any sort of research, then Africa University is the place to be.
Africa University is the school of hope in the Valley of Dreams. Come and join me. We're gonna make Africa better than before.
You might have not been to all the African countries. Come to Africa University and see Africa happening every day. An institution that offers a world-class education system.
Are you thinking of being a global person? Thinking of enhancing your business and leadership skills? Why not choose Africa University?
As a working mother and a wife, through one of its many flexible programs, Africa University has afforded me an opportunity to pursue my master's degree in intellectual property.
As former SRC president, Africa University sharpened my leadership skills. A university that rewards excellency and hard working.
Being a Catholic nun, I came to Africa University with a lot of mixed feelings. I was scared, a bit hesitant, and wondering how was I going to manage in a United Methodist institution. But you know what? I've experienced a vibrant, God-fearing, ecumenical community.
Welcome to Africa University. Sign up today and come and work with some of Africa's finest young talent. Whatever your background or field of interest, you will feel right at home.
Yes, thank you so much. That's your Africa University. And in January next year, Bishop Holston and Mrs. Holston are leading a trip to Africa University. That's what we look like from the air. We call it the School of Dreams in the Valley of Hope. You're going to see 3 African countries: Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And when we say you're going to see 3 African countries, that doesn't mean that the plane's going to touch down there and refuel, and then somebody's going to get on and you're going to take off again. Some people count countries like that. But it's a 10-day event, and the price is $4,475, and that's the total trip cost. From the time you leave home until the time you get back, you pay for nothing. If you book this kind of trip and look at these kind of places, this trip would cost you, through the travel agency, around $7,000 to $8,000. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to Zimbabwe first. You see Zimbabwe and surrounding countries. That's a map of Zimbabwe. First stop is going to be Africa University on the campus. You can see the fruit of your labor. You know, we have a theology building built by the people from South Carolina. The first fully dedicated female dormitory built by Dr. Jonas Kennedy for his wife's 76th birthday. He asked her what she wanted for her birthday. She said a dormitory at Africa University. He built it, paid cash for it. That's the same Jonas Kennedy. When you go to Claflin and you go into that now multi-purpose facility that has a swimming pool, all of that. Claflin grads in here, raise up your hand. This is the same Jonas Kennedy who built that dorm for his wife at AU. You'll have inspiring interactions, not just with students, but faculty, and with people in the community. When on our last trip there, Bishop Holston preached at the Rusape United Methodist Church on Communion Sunday. And people were standing outside the door looking in. There were so many people. I could give you that sermon he preached, but I'm not going to do it. I remember sermons. Also, Bishop, when you put this thing up, there are going to be some sermons preached about this life vest, probably this coming Sunday. But the point is, yeah, you give the bishop credit. But the point is, you get to interact with the church. And how do you know? How many of you know this is the connection? This is what the connection is about. All right? Then we go into Victoria Falls, one of the 7 wonders of the world. And if you hadn't been there, Victoria Falls make Niagara look like a teacup. Okay? And then you got to go on game drives. All of this is included. It's paid for. Fred, you need to be on this trip. I sure do. Yeah. It's paid for. You're going to see Victoria Falls. It starts in Zimbabwe, stretches all the way across Zambia on the Zambezi River. You will do river cruises on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe and Zambia. You'll do a river cruise on the Chobe River in Botswana. You'll see rhinoceroses, lions, those kinds of things. We go on game drives, not game hunting. The only kind of hunting we do is with a cell phone and you take a picture or a camera. That's what we do. Then we go to Johannesburg, to the National Apartheid Museum, to the Hector Peterson Museum. That picture of Bishop and Mrs. Holston in the middle, standing with 2 locals from Soweto, the township, is right up the street from Bishop Desmond Tutu's original home in Soweto. It's a museum now. And then on the other side of the street, you can take a rock, stand on the porch at Bishop Tutu's home, and throw it up the street to President Nelson Mandela's original home. And on the trip before last, when we were there, shortly after President Mandela died, every member of the group got a special acknowledgement from Mrs. Winnie Mandela. How many of you were on that trip? There's Reverend Frederick over there, yeah, over here. And these are the kind of things that you will see. If you're interested, the bishop's assistant, Lolly Hazelden, can give you information on it, or you can contact me through the AU Development Office. Now, let me tell you, this trip has not been put out on the website. Now, when we normally put this trip out on the website, we have a lot of people who are non-United Methodists who want to go. And on Bishop's second trip, he took a group from North Charleston with him. Reverend Nelson B. Rivers and certain members of his congregation from Charity Missionary Baptist Church. And so what we did was, Reverend Rivers was so impressed, he got his own trip. Charity is going on their own trip. So when it drops, it'll drop just before annual conference on the website. So I would encourage you to sign up early. Thank you so much for your support of Africa University. I hope this session this morning was useful to you. I want to thank the bishop for standing and providing his input. And this is our presentation. Madam Reverend, if you would come. Bishop, did you have a comment? Because my time is up, I'm unplugging.
Well, I know that you all, will you give Dr. Salley appreciation? And I know Reverend Millie is going to come up here and give us some instructions as to how we want to go. I'm glad, you know, these are the places that we need to be. I always ask myself the question, where is it that we need to have the conversations that really matter? And then the conversations that we need to have further should not be in the parking lots, on the email trail. We need to be talking with each other so that we can begin to formalize the types of groupings that will be able to make a difference. So annual conference is going to be a place that we need to be, and jurisdictional conference and general conference is all going to be the places that we need to be. And see, we've already forgotten that we got 5 bishops in the Southeast to elect. Did you know that? We normally do that until after we got elections. 5 bishops are going to be elected in the jurisdiction for just the Southeast. So I need for you to know that we have 5 retirements, and we have in there at least 2 or 3 bishops who have been in their areas 8 years and 1 in 4. So that just kind of lets you know the lay of the land, that there's going to be a lot of conversation that we're going to have to strategically prepare for. So I want to be thankful to you. But, you know, there's one other item up here. You don't mind me saying this. This is a facsimile of what? I just want to let you know that the anchor holds. I want to let you know that the anchor holds. Though the ship is battered, the anchor holds. Though the sails are torn, the anchor holds. Even though I may fall on my knees, even though I may fall on my knees and pray through the battered seas, I just want you to know that the anchor holds. And who is the anchor? All right, I just want you to remember that. I want you to remember that. That regardless of what we do, regardless of whatever happens, you don't give up on knowing who called you and who will lead you. You got to know who you are and whose you are. Praise be to God for sending us a Savior. And He is the reason that we're here. Thank you. That's all I got to say. Reverend Billy, come on, lead us.